Hi, everyone. Hello. Can someone just let me know in the chat if you can hear me all right, if you can see the slides, if you can see me? Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Thanks. Really appreciate that. Perfect. I just want to check before I start talking. Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to my webinar on key landlord responsibilities. I don't enjoy boring webinars where the host just says things that can be found on Google. So instead, I will set out the key requirements and share some tips and tricks along the way to actually help you in practice. My name is Alex, and I'm a dual qualified lawyer with over a decade of experience. Eight of those years I spent in housing and property investment, advising property developers, landlords, and other stakeholders. I'm currently a legal director at Fusion Law. Now, Fusion Law is part of a group of extraordinary companies supporting clients with expert tax advice, accounting services, recruitment, finance and investment, and of course, law. We endeavor to offer a truly 360 advisory service to all of our clients. Now, this is me. At the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A, but for those who wish to discuss a specific matter, please feel free to reach out via email or WhatsApp. My details are on the slide, and we can arrange a free legal consultation to discuss whatever there is to discuss. Now, I have also prepared a checklist. It was a bit last minute, but I thought it may be useful to have a checklist for onboarding new tenants, where you will find guidance on all that is needed to ensure that you are compliant and manage the tenancy correctly. So hopefully you will find that helpful and you will receive it via email after this webinar. Now, on to the good stuff. So as a landlord, we all know that you need to keep your properties free from disrepair. You need to make sure that all gas and electrics are safe. This includes maintaining the gas equipment with gas safe engineer annually, providing smoke alarms and carbon monoxide, and ensuring furniture is fire safe. You also need to provide an EPC and a gas safety cert at the start and following each inspection. You need to protect your tenant's deposit in a government scheme. You need to check their right to rent, usually with a passport or a visa, to confirm their immigration status. Now, you also need to give your tenant a copy of the How to Rent booklet as soon as they start renting from you. The law also now requires that the electrics are inspected at least once every 5 years, and in some circumstances it may be more frequently, and that a satisfactory electrical installation condition report is in place. Now, a note from my colleagues in tax to ensure that you remember about your taxes, especially income tax on your rental income, and to remember to obtain specialist advice on deducting day-to-day running expenses to reduce the tax that is due to the HMRC. Also, a note on data protection. You are required to comply with the Data Protection Act, as you will collect, store, and use personal data of your tenants. So please do register with ICO, have a privacy policy, and policies and procedures in place for processing that data. Now, robust tenancy, that is my favorite as the contract lawyer. We all know that it's good to have one and to protect your business, to protect your interests and so on. But some of my favorite provisions that should be included in a tenancy are surrounding abandonment. Now, when those tricky tenants disappear and you're left not knowing whether you should start the possession proceedings or what to do about your tenant's belongings, having the process for this in the contract will save the day. We can issue abandonment notice once or twice for good measure, and if there is no response and there is clear evidence that the tenant vacated the premises, you may be entitled to enter and take back possession. This is naturally subject to having proper contract policy and evidence in place, but it does make it easier. Now, in terms of notices, that's something a lot of landlords don't know, but if you have it in your contract, you can charge for issuing rent arrears notices or other notices to your tenants as long as they are reasonable. And that is often overlooked, but it's fairly helpful to know. Now, with added obligations on ensuring that tenants receive their EPC and gas safety in the booklet and the deposit information, this is now the most common ground for defense in possession proceedings. But now what I like to do in a tenancy agreement is have a simple checkbox for the tenant to sign to confirm the receipt of whatever they have received. This is such a simple solution and it always works in court. So it's really, really useful to have. Now, on to our favorite piece of legislation, the Renters Reform Bill. Now, we are all watching the bill very closely. The bill is making its way through Parliament right now. It's currently due for its second reading, and it's likely that there will be some time before we see any changes. But when we do, those changes will be significant. And amongst others, they will include changes relating to rent and other terms of assured tenancies. For example, landlords will now only be able to increase the rent annually by giving 2 months' notice, and the tenants will be able to challenge that increase in the first tier tribunal. Private rented sector ombudsman will also be introduced, which will make it easier to complain about landlords, and tenants will be given the right to request to have a pet in the property, which the landlord cannot unreasonably refuse. Now, there has been a lot of talk about abolishing Section 21 notice procedure used to terminate an AST, which is often referred to as a non-fault eviction. Now, in fact, what the bill intends to do is to abolish all ASTs entirely and remove the ability to grant a fixed term tenancy altogether. Now, the effect of that will be that most tenancy agreements will be fully periodic, i.e., there will be monthly assured short-hold tenancies, which may only be terminated by the landlord, where they have one or more of the grounds for possession and they are satisfied. This will make it much more difficult for landlords to terminate tenancies, especially if they don't have a legitimate reason to do so. Now, in terms of the grounds for possession, the bill proposes to amend the current ones. Specifically, they will allow landlords to require possession when they want to occupy the property or when they want to sell the property. Also, in terms of rent arrears, the usual mandatory ground 8 will remain, but there will be additional ground 8, which will allow landlords to commence possession proceedings if within the 3-year period, at least 2 months' rent is unpaid for at least a day on 3 separate occasions, which is quite interesting. Now, it's worth keeping an eye on those when you're setting up plans for your property business, because there will be a lot of changes and they will be very significant. Now, landlords, and we all know that, again, landlords must ensure that properties that they rent out are fit for human habitation. A property may be unfit because of disrepair, damp and mold, water, or health and safety hazards. Tenants can, since 2020 actually, tenants can take court action where property is unfit, or there may be local authority enforcement where there are specific hazards. Now, there has been a massive spike in ambulance chasers, lawyers who are urging tenants to sue landlords under the Act. What they do is they use the pre-action protocol for housing conditions, and they reach out to hundreds of landlords every month on behalf of their tenants. In return, naturally, they expect their fees to be covered by the landlord, and those are normally free in excess of 3,000 plus. So it's really worth keeping up with property inspections, fixing any obvious issues, and keeping detailed records and property inspection reports. Now, in terms of HMOs, there are 3 types of licensing currently out there. The first one is selective licensing, and that applies to properties that are even let to a single family household or to two sharers. Now, these are only applicable to certain areas designated by the local authority, so please always check. There is also an additional HMO licensing, which applies to smaller HMOs, which are let to 3 or 4 unrelated people who form 2 or more households with shared kitchen and bathroom. Again, this one applies to certain areas which are designated by the local authority. Now, lastly, there is a mandatory HMO licensing, which is a national scheme which affects all the local authorities, all the councils and all the areas. And it applies to large HMOs, which are let to 5 or more unrelated people, which form, again, 2 or more households and shared kitchen or a bathroom. Always check which licensing scheme applies to your property and comply accordingly to ensure that you're not fined or an injunction prohibiting you from letting the property altogether is not placed upon it. In larger HMOs, you must also ensure that there are enough rubbish bins, the property is not overcrowded, electrics are checked every 5 years, shared areas and facilities are clean and in good repair, fire safety measures are in place, there are enough facilities for cooking and washing, that you have fire doors installed in each bedroom, living room and kitchen, amongst other requirements. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Check with the local council if any rules apply to your property, even if it's a smaller HMO in the area. If they do, you may have additional responsibilities, even if there are less than 3 tenants. If you need an HMO license, there are minimum bedroom sizes. The council could have higher standards for bedroom sizes. So again, always check. You are responsible for fixing and repairing shared areas if you have a tenancy agreement for separate rooms. So carry out regular inspections to ensure the property does not fall into disrepair. You could also be responsible for paying council tax if the HMO was a built or a converted property that was converted to be lived in by more than one household, or it is lived in by 2 or more tenants or licensees. A tip for HMOs, in terms of providing all the required information, is to get a simple corkboard of Amazon for £10 and to put the key documents that are required by law on it together with the fire safety, emergency numbers, rubbish collection and cleaning timetable, and hanging it by your door. That is a massive tick in compliance, and it's such an easy thing to do. Councils can prosecute landlords who do not follow HMO rules. Also, renting out a property without the right HMO license is now a criminal offense, and under the most severe penalty could lead to criminal conviction. So it is now more important than ever to ensure that the right license is obtained and that you comply with all the HMO rules. Now, lastly, the Tenant Fees Act bans most letting fees and caps tenancy deposits paid by tenants in the private rented sector in England. If you charge your tenants with anything other than what is listed on the slide, such as referencing fees, inventory costs, it will be prohibited payment. You may be punished by significant fine, starting from £5,000. So again, it's very important to bear that in mind. Now, as I promised, it was short and sweet. Hopefully, you found it helpful. It's let me see if there are any questions. Right, Terence, yes, you will receive a copy of the slides. And like I said, you will receive my checklist. My checklist goes into everything I have covered, plus a bit more. There is no point of discussing everything right now because it will be forgotten anyway. Plus, checklist is just an awesome way of having something in place to make sure that you check everything and you're happy and compliant. So you'll definitely have that. And I don't think there are any more questions. So unless there is anything else that someone wants to ask, I will bring this to the end. However, you do have my contact details, which were on one of the first slides, which I will just pull up again. can you recap quickly on the conditions of raising rents? Yes, so that was, which slide it was? Okay, right, this one. Okay, so what happens with the renters reform bill, the whole thing can be reviewed online if you are bored at night and have nothing better to read before sleep. What the bill is trying to achieve, and that is subject to change as it passes through the usual checks in the parliament. But the idea is that the landlords will be able to increase their rents. So now that we're not going to have ASTs anymore for a fixed period of time, now, because it's not going to be fixed, it's going to run monthly. What will happen, we will no longer have a 2-year contract and be able to automatically increase a price every 2 years, for example. What will happen now is you will have a monthly periodic tenancy, and you will only be able to increase the rent annually, so once a year. There were landlords who were trying to increase it every few months in England that were scrutinized a lot. So now you will be able to increase the rent annually once by giving 2 months notice, and the tenants will be able to challenge that and take that to the first year tribunal. So I don't expect that every tenant will do that. As long as you stick to the RPI, that kind of rate, you should be fine. But there are landlords who are increasing rents by a lot, and I expect that those will be escalated to the tribunal. And another thing to note is the private rented sector ombudsman, which will be introduced. That will make much easier for tenants to complain about various things as well. So yes, it's probably useful once the legislation kicks in to make sure that it's all reasonable and organized. I hope that answers your question, Tino. Barry, where do I get the Amazon document thing you mentioned? I'm just talking about the cork board. So if what I'll do is I'll probably, in my checklist, I'll put a photograph of a board I have done in the past. I think that will help. The board is just a cork board, the one that kids use to, put sticky notes and stuff. What you do is you then put all the documents that you need to provide, such as the emergency numbers and landlord's details and so on, onto the board, and you stick it by the door. And that is a big tick in compliance for HMOs, because you do need to make sure that these are communicated to your tenants. So yeah, I'll put in the checklist a photo of that. So hopefully that will help. And can I watch the video again somewhere? Yes, you will receive a link. So everyone who's here and everyone who registered will receive an email with all the slides, with my checklist, and with a copy of this video. So absolutely. And do you think the renters, so Dalji, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, do you think that the renters reform bill will be amended, and by which day do you think it will be implemented by? I have no idea. I think the initial discussions started probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I recall they were going to do it within a couple of years. And then COVID happened. And then the courts and the whole system was extremely delayed with everything. And they haven't looked at it for, a good couple of years. Now it's just at its second reading. If you have a look at that slide, you can see how much more they have to go through to pass. I don't think we're looking at, sooner than 2025, but anything can change. It depends how smooth it goes through all those stages. So, it's definitely something to watch. And can you please add to your list what documents have to be displayed? Yes, sure. Let me make a note. I will put that in there. So you can have your full checklist with the HMO list, Bruce. I'll do that. Of course, my pleasure. Okay, there are some questions here. Hi, can I get a copy of this in an email, Saj? Yes, you will, as I've mentioned. My contact details, yes, you can have them. Let me just scroll back to here. There you go. This is my direct email address, and this is my direct WhatsApp. When I'm in meetings, I don't answer calls, obviously, but feel free to send me a message and I'll call you back, and then I can answer whatever questions you have. Do you deal with house rent? I mean, are you a estate agent? Well, I'm not an estate agent. I'm a lawyer. So what I deal with are, well, I assist with possession proceedings, with tenancy agreements, with disputes with tenants, debt recovery at times, environmental issues with the local authority, HMO issues, licensing, yes, basically anything anything and everything like this, but I'm not a real estate agent, although I work with many. And right, of course, Paul, Bruce, Dalji, thank you. Thank you so much. If there are any questions I haven't answered, please feel free to send me a message or an email. And yeah, I hope you found this helpful. And if there's anything we haven't covered, just reach out and we can discuss it offline. So thank you so much, guys, for your time, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.